Couple other final things, Willie. You mentioned Michael Saylor in the past. I've had Michael on, and it was an amazing conversation. Obviously, to see someone like that go in and to kind of, see the U.S. dollar, through the paradigm of, kind of a global shift. It has been very interesting. I think you've said it's really an ETF in disguise, which is kind of where I'm going with this question. I had Michael on the show, and he was just like, Brian, I'm buying Bitcoin no matter what the price. When you hear Michael say that, it's like you said earlier, it's like these people are buying. He's like, I'll buy it up to 250,000, I think is what he said to me last year. And again, people just, it was one line he said, but you can start to see there are buyers out there, and you see this from on-chain analysts that are just in this for the long term. As far as this year, do you see ETFs being something that comes to play? Do you see other public companies buying Bitcoin on their balance sheet, or does it not matter because MicroStrategy has kind of given us that option? Just your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of companies that are buying Bitcoin under the radar by buying MicroStrategy stock and their bond offerings. And I think that they'll become a easy, tick the box. I've got my Bitcoin exposure in the treasury, but I don't have to figure out custodial issues. I don't have to go to the board and figure out Bitcoin on in the physical on the assets. I think that and I haven't heard Michael Saylor announce this. Maybe he's not allowed to, but I kind of think people are just buying MicroStrategy in their multiple offerings, and that's why they're like the super treasury whale. If you look, I track the public treasuries over time, and the only game in town is MicroStrategy. And we have got spot ETFs in Canada, and we've got the Grayscale ETF, which is not really a full ETF, but it's a pseudo ETF that's available to the public. The ETFs are pretty stagnant. They're slightly trending downwards. Meanwhile, you've got MicroStrategy. From the moment they did the Bitcoin for institutions conference in February of last year, they just went linear upwards, right as ETFs went linear downwards, which I found that very interesting. I think that MicroStrategy undoubtedly is perceived as the Bitcoin exposure equity on the stock exchange. You certainly wouldn't buy and hold ProShares ETF, which is not really holding the spot, but holding the futures. There's this very expensive, probably 15% rollover and contango fees. Just the mechanism in which they get that exposure is very, very expensive. So that's not a long-term hold vehicle for anyone who knows what they're doing. Spot ETFs aren't really being taken up. The only game in town is MicroStrategy right now, and maybe some of the smaller mining shares. And I don't know if we'll see a spot ETF anytime soon. I don't have any special knowledge on how the regulators and the SEC perceive that. It's certainly a new kind of area to regulate in terms of holding the underlying, which they don't understand very well. And probably these vested interests. Maybe if you want to take a stab at it, these vested interests have a futures ETF over a spot because it provides price control on Bitcoin. If you have a lot of paper Bitcoin around, you do get price impact amongst the trading world, and that can be very profitable. I have seen that already. The whole market's behaving very differently since the ProShares ETF came onto the market in terms of how the price is performing compared to what we're seeing on chain. It's very different right now.
And the futures always add tons of leverage to the system and more volatility, and you can see that in the price action as well.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, if anyone remembers the dream time of October 2020 to the first couple of months of 2021, and we just rallied from 10 to 50 and then eventually 60, that was a spot rally. That was people buying the underlying asset and putting it in putting it in their cold storage, and the futures really had no say in that because we were buying the asset, not the future. The futures was taking a free ride by going long. Normally, when you do that, they get killed, but the demand was there. But now we're in a situation where it's not quite like that, and the futures is most of the volume, and there's a lot of trading games going on, and the price is chopping around all over the place, and it's always going in the way in which it's least predicted, just to screw with the most amount of traders. And it's not. I don't think it's very healthy for the long-term impact of Bitcoin. So I would really love to see a spot ETF being approved, and futures ETFs falling out of favor.